For years, Jack Hayes had spent his life keeping Mexican armies out of Texas. He had scouted Vasquez. He had baited Wall's cavalry into the guns at Salado Creek. He had helped bury men that Mexican soldiers killed on Texas ground. In 1846, all of that reversed. The border he had defended became a line he was ordered to cross, at the head of a regiment, under a flag that was now, at last, his own. This is the story of how the defender became the invader, and of the name his Rangers earned in Mexico that has never entirely washed off. Welcome back to the Western Ledger. I'm Lamar. Today, Jack Hayes goes to a real war between nations, and we follow his Rangers into the streets of Monterrey and into the harder question of what they did there. On December 29, 1845, Texas stopped being a republic and became a state of the United States, and annexation came with a fight attached. The old argument, where Texas ended, was now the United States argument. Texas claimed the Rio Grande. Mexico said the Nueces, and still recognized none of it. In the spring of 1846, that 100-mile strip of disputed brush finally caught fire. The United States and Mexico were at war. The spark was a clash on that very strip. Mexican cavalry fought American dragoons north of the Rio Grande, and President Polk told Congress that American blood had been shed on American soil. Whether it was American soil at all was precisely the question. The war came anyway. And for a U.S. Army marching into a country it barely knew, the Texans were suddenly the most valuable men on the continent. They knew the ground. They knew the enemy. They had spent a decade fighting exactly this war. In April, General Zachary Taylor called for Texas volunteers. The man who answered had been fighting Mexico's armies longer than almost anyone alive. Jack Hayes, by now a captain turned major turned colonel, raised the 1st Regiment of Texas Mounted Riflemen. His old Ranger companies swung back into the saddle. Ben McCulloch, Samuel Walker, Bigfoot Wallace, Ad Gillespie. Men who had ridden with him at Walker's Creek and Salado now rode south into Mexico as United States cavalry. Consider the strangeness of it. A decade before, these same men had watched Santa Anna's army come north to crush the Texas Rebellion. Now they wore the blue of a great power and rode the other way, the hunters for once, instead of the hunted. And here is the thing you have to understand about these men, because it explains everything that follows. They did not ride into Mexico as neutral soldiers. Most of them carried a decade of grief. The Alamo, Goliad, where hundreds of surrendered Texans were shot. Mir, the Bexar prisoners who had rotted in Perote. Nearly every man in that column had lost someone or nearly been someone in the long war with Mexico. They rode south as soldiers of the United States, but a good number of them rode south for revenge. Taylor's problem was simple and enormous. Between his army and the heart of northern Mexico stood Monterrey, a city built for defense. Thick-walled stone houses with flat roofs. A great fortified citadel the Americans nicknamed the Black Fort. Fortified hills guarding the western approach. Cannon sighted down the streets. Thousands of Mexican regulars under General Ampudia waiting inside. Taken head-on, it would be a slaughter. The city sat in a bowl of mountains, its back against a gorge, its approaches swept by gun batteries on every height. To the east, the way in was a killing lane. To the west, 3 fortified hills had to fall before anyone could enter from that side at all. Whatever Taylor chose, men were going to die in numbers. But before you can storm a city, you have to reach it, and know how. That was the Rangers' first gift to Taylor. Ben McCulloch and his scouts ranged far ahead through country no U.S. officer knew, finding the practical roads, locating the water, pinpointing the enemy. It was McCulloch who confirmed the Mexican army was massing at Monterrey, and McCulloch who scattered the guerrillas from the army's path simply by being in the neighborhood. This was the Rangers' real value, and it is easy to lose under all the gunfighting. An army is blind without scouts, and in a foreign country, it is nearly helpless. Hayes's men were the eyes that let Taylor march thousands through hostile mountains and arrive more or less whole at the one place he needed to be. The Rangers were, by every account, superbly mounted, armed to the teeth, and completely at home in a country that unnerved everyone else in the army. They were also, an American officer noted uneasily, a little too eager for the fight to come. By the third week of September 1846, Taylor's army stood before Monterrey. The Texans, one officer complained, rashly set the tempo of the whole assault, which is a polite way of saying they could not wait to get in. The battle for Monterrey lasted 3 days, and it was fought in 2 places at once, on the hills to the west and in the streets of the city itself. The eastern attack went in first, and it went badly. American regulars pushed into the edge of the city and straight into a crossfire from the fortified houses and the guns of the Black Fort, and were cut down in the streets in numbers that shook the whole army. Whatever else Monterrey would be, it would not be cheap. General William Worth's division, with Hayes's Rangers, swung west to take the heights that guarded the city, Federation Hill, then Independence Hill, then the Mexican strongpoint at the Bishop's Palace. The Texans went up those slopes on foot, under fire, and took them. But the harder fight was down in the city, and there the Rangers taught the United States Army something new. Fighting through a stone city, street by street, was suicide for troops trained to march in the open. The defenders fired down from rooftops and through loopholes cut in the walls. So the Rangers, men who had fought at close quarters their whole lives, showed Worth's regulars how it was done. Don't march in the streets. Go through the houses. Break the interior walls with crowbars and picks. Move from room to room and roof to roof. Clear each block from the inside, and never hand the men above you a target. It was a method born on the Texas frontier, where a man who reloaded in the open died, and it translated perfectly to a city. Where the regulars had bled in the streets, the Rangers and the men who learned from them moved through the walls themselves, unseen, and came up behind the defenders again and again. It was brutal, intimate, room-by-room work. Exactly the kind of fight a 5-shot revolver was built for, and the Rangers were murderously good at it. It cost them. Among the Ranger dead was Robert Addison Gillespie, Ad Gillespie, who had been badly wounded years earlier at Walker's Creek and had come back to fight again and again and again. He was killed taking the heights above Monterrey. General Worth thought enough of him to put his name on a hill. On some maps, it is still Mount Gillespie. By the third day, the city had become a slaughterhouse of stone. Both armies had bled heavily, and civilians were trapped in the middle of it, huddled in cellars as the fighting moved house to house over their heads. After 3 days, with the Americans grinding into the city center and his position crumbling, the Mexican commander asked for terms. Taylor gave generous terms. He let Amputia's army march out under arms and agreed to an armistice, a decision that enraged President Polk back in Washington, who wanted the enemy destroyed, not escorted home. Monterrey had fallen. It had cost both sides dearly. The armistice would not hold. Polk overruled it within weeks, and the war ground on. But Monterrey was taken, and the road deeper into Mexico now lay open. And then, for Hayes's regiment, the war simply stopped. Their 6-month enlistments ran out. The 1st Texas Mounted Riflemen was dissolved, and the men rode home to Texas that October, with the war not yet half over. And the war was moving on, and so was the weapon. One of Hayes's own officers, Samuel Walker, the man who took a Comanche lance at Walker's Creek and lived, was about to sit down with Samuel Colt and design a revolver heavier and deadlier than anything yet made. The gun that fight had inspired was about to arrive in Mexico. Next episode, Jack Hayes comes back to the war, this time for the march on Mexico City itself, where his Rangers would earn the name Diablos Tejanos in full, and where the Walker Colt would finally reach their hands. If you want the frontier told whole, the glory and the cost in the same breath, subscribe to the Western Ledger and turn on notifications. I'm Lamar. Thanks for being here.